How many of you have noticed the moon earlier in the week in the mornings? Like the sun is up, but the moon is still there, huge and bright, right? Oh, just over here. This kind of, squatting over Mayfair United Church, sort of on the horizon. I couldn't believe it. I know all these sciencey things, and I know all about the moon and stars and how things move, and we can talk to the kids about all that. But I still look up, and it just absolutely freaks me out, and brings me great sense of wonder. And the moon can still surprise me, especially when it's up in the day, right, like that. When it's so big, supermoon. Poor sun. We never have a super sun. Never give it its due. Never have a blue sun or super sun or a harvest sun, right? We never say that. The moon gets all the special titles. But so the supermoon was over here, and you just driving across the Broadway Bridge, or whatever, it's just like, holy moly, the moon! It's 10 o'clock in the morning, and there it is. It's big, it's full, it's beautiful. The moon is at once like an old friend. Like when you get up in the middle of the night, which I'm doing more often in my age. When you get up in the middle of the night and the moon's shining through the window, you say, "Hey, old friend, there you are." Right? The moon sometimes seems like an old companion. And then at other times, it can still seem very mysterious and strange. I mean, it's just hanging there. It's just like hanging in the sky. I know the science people like it's not just hanging, it's being held. But, it does, if you're filled with wonder and curiosity, it just seems like it's just hanging there. It's the closest, biggest thing we've got in the sky that doesn't fall. Right? Like it's just there. And it's got this mystery about it. It's sometimes exotic. I mean, only 12 people have ever been there. Only 12 human beings have ever stood on the moon. And the moon isn't a place for standing even, so that's extraordinary. It's a place of mystery. There's nothing going on the moon. It has no atmosphere. It doesn't have sunshine and, not sunshine, but like warm days and then cold days. It's just so different than us. So exotic and foreign and mysterious. It's like a friend and a mysterious stranger all thrown into one. Kind of like the Magi. See where I was going? It's not a sermon about the moon. It's about the Magi. The Magi, the wise men. We say there was 3 because of T.S. Eliot. Not because of anything else. There's 3 Magi. Why? Because there's 3 gifts. As if like 20 Magi couldn't have bring those 3 gifts. Those are really expensive gifts. I'm thinking it took more than 3 guys to scrape together the myrrh, the frankincense, and the gold. Just saying. We don't know if there's 20, 35, 15, or 3. But we have this really nice romantic image of the 3. I'm giving you lots of foreign and cool images of the Magi. There's 3, they show up, and they have 3 gifts. And they come from Persia, from the east, it says. Hey, here's a cool thing about the Magi I learned. They were mentioned, and this is because I'm married to a very smart woman. They were mentioned in Daniel chapter 2. And we read from Daniel a few months ago, remember? The prophet Daniel, remember the story? Daniel in the lion's den, all that kind of stuff? And what were their names? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, or Abednego, which depends on who you are. And remember, we learned that they were given different names. That those weren't their Hebrew names, those were their Persian names. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Well, Daniel himself was mentioned early in chapter 2 when the name change happened. And it talks about the magicians, the Magi, and the Chaldeans, and all these people, the priests of the court arriving. And then they were given these new names, these high up Hebrew men. And Daniel's name that he was given was Belteshazzar. That's one of the names of the wise men, Belshazzar. Right? Who knew? We should read Daniel chapter 2 more often. So not only are the Magi mentioned, and it's translated magician in the New Revised, but I'm sure it says Magi in other translations. They're mentioned in Daniel 2 as the priests of the court, but also his name was changed to Belshazzar. Or it says Belteshazzar, but really, it's the same name. I thought that was pretty cool. The Magi, coming from Persia, coming from the East, are men of mystery. They're exotic, they're strange, they're different, and yet we talk about them so often and we sing about them, they're like old friends. like we know who they are. But if you dig deep, we really don't know who they are. They're not Jews, let me tell you that. And they're foreigners. They're men of science and men of faith, men of wisdom, who were the royal priests in Persia. That's Babylon, that's, Iraq. They were Persian royal court priests. They were, in fact, Zoroastrians. That's a faith that still exists today. I think I read today 190,000 Zoroastrians still alive. There's been some famous Zoroastrians like Freddie Mercury from Queen. Did you know that? Freddie Mercury was a Zoroastrian? Ken's like, yeah, I knew that. Yeah, this is like Ken's like, yeah, I know everything about Freddie Mercury. Big Queen fan. Freddie Mercury or Zubin Mehta, the famous conductor of the New York Philharmonic, is Zoroastrian. An ancient faith of Persia. A faith centered on fire and light. Good to talk about them on Epiphany. So these Magi were the priesthood of the Zoroastrian faith. And for us in this story, they represent the other. Always when talking about Matthew chapter 2, the Magi are the outsiders. The come from away, as we'd say in the Maritimes. They're the other in the experience of the Christ. Those who are different. And often the Magi have been spoken to kind of, we've preached about them being like the proof about who Jesus was. But we go a little far. We say they're the proof that Jesus was the only Son of God and all this kind of stuff that's not mentioned in the story whatsoever. The Magi are in fact the other that come and are embraced in the story of God's love. They are the widening of God's tent immediately, right at the beginning of the story. You know, the Magi didn't convert, right? They didn't become followers of Jesus. There's nothing in the story about that. They went home by a different route. But they came because they belonged to a faith and a system of understanding that would embrace all important kings, prophets, holy people. And so they came following the star, and maybe they did this for others as well, but they came to bring worship and praise and offer gifts to this great king, who would be King of the Jews in their mind, and a great prophet and a great leader and a holy person. And I love this understanding, this what we call a pluralistic understanding of people of other faith coming and adoring Jesus and recognizing the Christ light in him. In my mind, this is a story of God's love being big and broad and wide and not narrow, as some of us may think. You know, it's odd that after many millennia, we still think that God is a God who loves tradition. That God doesn't actually like change. God likes the same hymns to be sung, or God likes the same prayers to be said, or God likes us to show up on Sundays every Sunday because that's what you're supposed to do, or God likes it when we dress a certain way for church, or God likes, these religious traditions. And I just, this week is the first time I thought about this, I kind of get the sense that when we left some of the conservatism, or let's call it the orthodoxy of Christianity, when the United Church has moved away and, this is a good day, communion, everybody's welcome at our table. Everybody's welcome at our table. That wasn't true when I was a kid. You had to be a confirmed member of the United Church of Canada. And before that, we've talked about this, elders used to come in the 20s and 30s. They'd come to your house and visit and then decide whether you were ready for communion and give you a pog that said, redeemed for one communion, basically. And you were allowed to come. Yeah, Denise, it's true. Denise's like, this can't be true. You would have made it every time, Denise, don't worry. But this has changed. The communion table has changed. The United Church, we're sometimes treated as we're kind of loosey-goosey, kind of airy-fairy, with our open belief system. And the more that happens, a whole bunch of us, I think, deep down think we're betraying God. That we're leaving God behind somehow in changing the traditions in the United Church of Canada. And moving away, I was at a concert in late December with Hawksley Workman. Great singer-songwriter, and he was doing a Christmas concert at St. James Anglican. It's called Emmanuel Anglican now, whatever. And I don't like change. And he was saying, it's beautiful to be in an Anglican church. He says, I grew up in the United Church. He said they're kind of the same. And someone snorted and laughed. It had to be an Anglican because they don't like being compared to us. The United Church people were like, yeah, we're kind of like the Anglicans because we're like open, right? We're ready for anything. But, they had this great laughter, and then Hawksley went on and on about the differences and how funny that was. And, Anglican laughed thought that we might be the same. But the more we move away from our Anglican brothers and sisters, the more we move away from the Presbyterians or our Methodist groups, there's a sneaky feeling that somehow we've left God behind as well. Because we don't have the smoke anymore, we don't light as many candles, maybe we don't sing the old-time hymns. We don't sing. I mean, there's a whole bunch of hymns from my childhood I would love to sing that we don't sing anymore. I know you're looking at me, well, you're the minister, you can pick them. No, we've moved. Our beliefs have moved, our sense of music has changed. But we haven't left God behind, because God doesn't love tradition. God doesn't love the same and sameness, homogeneity, everything just the way it's always been. How do I know that? Because God sent the Magi. And the Magi were welcomed into the story, our most important story, of God's light coming into the world, of Emmanuel, God with us. And there were these different people, non-Jews, didn't go to synagogue, didn't know the prayers, didn't know the right things to say, didn't have the right incantations, didn't bring Jewish gifts, didn't celebrate Passover. These outsiders, these others, were welcomed in to God's great story. I say God says, vive la différence. It's so funny that we have this creator God who's created us all to be so different. And then there's a bunch of us, usually from Western Europe traditions, that believe that actually God wants us all to be sort of the same. Not sort of the same, absolutely the same. That English is the language of God, right? Just ask the Hindus. English isn't necessarily the language of God, right? It used to be Latin was the language of God. How did that change? Right? How many of you learned Latin in school? Nobody. Where's Margaret? She's not here. I know she learned Latin in school. Latin was the language of God. Before that, it was Greek was the language of God. Hebrew was the language of God. Everybody's got a corner on what the language of God is because we believe that God somehow wants us all to be one, the same, exactly the same way, same tradition, same thing, same language, same skin tone, whatever. The Magi blow that right out of the water. Right at the beginning of Jesus' story, right in the Gospel of Matthew. These other guys, these different guys, these diversity guys, hello, we're here. And they're so foreign and so different. I mean, Mary and Joseph must have been terrified. Right? Imagine if Persian priests, Zoroastrian priests walked right into Mayfair United Church today and said, hey, that was a great sermon, David. Can we have communion? Remember a couple years ago we had Muslims come for Christmas Eve, 9 o'clock? Remember? It was great. Who was I forget who greeted them at the door. Somebody came and found me in my office. Said, Dave, I think there's Muslims here, and they're asking for you. And I'm like, I knew they were coming. It's great. It's God messing with us in this beautiful, light-giving, radiant way. God loves diversity because God created diversity. God doesn't want us to be the same. It's a simple message, but it's a profound message that we've yet to really, truly embrace. In the 21st century, during the Trump administration, in the midst of anti-Muslim sentiment in the prairies, and here's how you know we don't have an anti-immigrant sentiment in the prairies because we don't mind it when Irishmen come to drive truck in Saskatoon. But we really get bothered when Muslims come to work. I don't call it anti-immigrant sentiment anymore. It's an anti-Muslim sentiment we have on the prairies. And of course, in a time where the reconciliation movement between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people is growing bigger and better every year, this is the time to pay attention to the Magi. This is a time for us to read everything we can about them. The Journey of the Magi, great book you could read. To read about them, to understand them, to embrace their foreignness, And not make them all Christianified. Not turn them all into like these guys who were just like Jesus. Or just like Mary and Joseph. They were so foreign and so different and so wonderful in their godliness. This is the time for us to know at the beginning of the story, God intended more people to be in on the story. I love that we have communion because you get to see each other. Your backs aren't turned to one another. When we come to communion, you get to kind of watch people and see them, and we get to move our bodies together. It's a very corporate action, communion. We come up to the table, we take the bread, we dip it, we put it in our mouths, and we do this all together. It's this beautiful spirit of movement. I want you to look at each other's diversity. We're getting more and more we're diverse at Mayfair United Church, and even before that, we were diverse. Even, in the last 10 years, before that, last 20 years, we're more diverse than we think. We're diverse in our jobs, we're diverse in our incomes, we're diverse in our backgrounds. Some of us are from this Western European country. Some people have descendants from Eastern European countries. Ken Johnston struggled to say Merry Christmas to me in Ukrainian today. He didn't get it out of his mouth, but he's thinking about it. And, and some of us are all... Who said Merry Christmas in Ukrainian today and yesterday? Anybody? Yeah, you were thinking about it. You got friends and family. You got people from Ireland and Scotland descent. We've got people who descended from people in Asia and Africa and other parts of Europe and South America, all in this congregation. We've got Indigenous First Nations people in our congregation. We've got Métis people in our congregation. It's exciting. So we're diverse. So start at home. Start looking at the diversity and appreciating what we have here, but also get ready to go out into the world and see the Magi everywhere you look. The other is waiting for us, waiting for God's light to be shone. We're not there, we're not converting them, we're thanking them. We're celebrating with them the light that's shared between us all, and it's the light that God has given us to share. May it be so. Amen.